Seductive Lure of Human Rubble is a title that... All right, well, okay, I'll tell you what I said.
Let's try it one more time.
Lives in Ruins, Archaeologists and the Seductive Lure of Human Rubble is a title that I think tells you very much that the people who are profiled in the book are not just digging in the remains of lost civilizations. They are also people whose lives seem to be sacrificed to their passion. What archaeologists do is say, fine, you could have the history books, but we want the proof in the ground. We want ground proof that something is what you say it is. One graduate student told me, when the apocalypse comes, you want to know an archaeologist, because we know how to make fire, catch food, and create hill forts. And I promptly added her to my address book. Knows how to make hill forts. Who can say when that will come in handy? They're the most resourceful people that I've ever met. I mean, they can take some duct tape and a Swiss Army knife and repair anything, figure out anything, improvise. I would wait and see how long it took archaeologists to mention Indiana Jones. 20 minutes was the longest amount of time it took. Even the ones who say they hate him kind of love him because he's been a recruiter for their field. He got everything wrong. Everything about it is wrong except for the spirit of it. And in fact, when you talk to archaeologists, no, you don't just grab things and run.
Why have snakes?
No, the problem is not snakes and spiders. The problem is mosquitoes. But mosquitoes are not very cinematic, are they? Mosquitoes, I had malaria 4 times. I would hear that kind of thing from people over and over again. And mosquitoes are a much bigger problem than hairy spiders. I went to my own backyard. I went throughout my state. Fishkill, New York is not exactly known as an archaeological destination. There is what the archaeologist I was following said was the most significant archaeological site in the United States. It happens to be the place where the Fishkill Supply Depot was located during the Revolutionary War. The depot was in operation for almost the entire length of the war. It remained a secret from the British. It was never burned, discovered, or compromised, and it's still pretty much a secret. A Revolutionary War graveyard that is bigger than anything we've found yet. I went to Cyprus and went on a dig for an archaeology site that was very concerned with the 1st century BC. I went to Peru, and then I climbed Machu Picchu with a bunch of archaeologists from different countries, which was fascinating. I'm very interested in people who are connecting us with history. I like people who are passionate about their work. I'm interested in talking to people who are devoted to an idea about connecting us with our past. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, here I am. So my first book about obituary writers came about because I had been writing what I thought were obituaries for magazines, for celebrities that were not quite dead yet. And the work dried up. Magazines weren't publishing it anymore. And somebody said, well, you could write a funny book about obituaries. And I thought, great. That worked out. Then librarians and archivists, I would have been a librarian had my hometown library given me a nickel an hour raise, but they decided no, they really couldn't afford a nickel an hour. That tells you how old I am. And so I did not become a librarian. Oh no. When I sat down, no, don't worry about it. Oh, she lost a boot.
Yep.
When I had the idea to write about archaeologists, you are just a full-service person, aren't you? Thank you. When I had the idea to write a book about archaeologists, I was
passionate about. I knew that's what I was going to do. I was going to go on digs and I was going to write about archaeologists. And my editor was baffled. What did that have to do with the other topics? And I don't know. I want to do it. I really, really want to do it. I did not realize a number of things, including the fact that it was a science, okay? So, how I faked it. Here are a couple of the topics that I started collecting when I set out to write about archaeologists. 600-year-old bras unearthed in Austrian castle. 400-year-old witch cottage discovered with sealed room with the bones of a cat buried inside the wall. Why? Well, I mean, I'm sure it had to do with a spell or something, right? Archaeologists disturb tomb of badass Mayan warrior queen. And one of my favorites, which I never figured out how to write about, archaeologists officially declare collective sigh over paleo diet. Quote, in a rare display of professional consensus, anthropologists, archaeologists, and molecular biologists have formally released an exasperated sigh over the popularity of the so-called paleo diet during a 2-day conference dedicated to the topic. Okay, I'm really sorry I missed that conference, by the way. How do you go about embracing a subject that has this many wacky things going on in it? And that's just a taste of the wacky stuff, by the way. As I came to learn, archaeology has to do with the entire planet, not just the crust of the earth, but the oceans and whatever humans have left that has floated down to the bottom of the oceans and the seas. And it also is concerned with the detritus that's up in space. Any place where humans have left trash or have lived is of interest to archaeologists. And the key thing is humans, okay? Now, I didn't fully understand this, and I know plenty of educated people who do not understand this either. I got offers the whole time I was working on the book, 4 years. I know a great paleontologist I can connect you with. I can get you on a dinosaur dig. Well, guess what? Dinosaurs don't have anything to do with humans, right? We never got to, hunt and eat them. And just the other day, I got this wonderful gift from a friend of mine who really gave it to me. It's like it was a collector's item until I took it out of the wonderful sealed thing. This is from a Barbie series, We Girls Can Do Anything. And they had Barbie doing a lot of really kind of exotic professions. This is paleontologist Barbie. And if you were any closer, you could see she has little dinosaurs printed on her camp shirt. Isn't that cute? She is dressed for the field, oh boy. And, oh dear, she lost a hairdo collector thing. In her little rucksack here is a pink Tyrannosaurus Rex. Okay, so we have to rename this Barbie Excavating Barbie, okay, to make her relevant to the topic tonight. It is only when they are dealing with humans that people call themselves archaeologists. And they're interested in anything that humans have touched, the bones of humans, places where humans have lived, and particularly their trash. Hold on just a minute. Okay, so how did I embrace this subject? I did it the same way I had done my 2 previous books, which is I listened to the people who were doing that work. And I was looking for voices. I had taught the book, does anybody know the book Working by Studs Terkel? No. That was a book that I used in teaching freshman comp when I was in writing school. And it's not even a written work. It is a series of oral histories that have been put together, that have been edited and put together. The voices of the people that leap out of that book are absolutely compelling. They say amazing things. They are unique, each of them. What they come up with, you know, the human variability is a fascinating thing. And my ear is tuned to those kinds of oral histories. That's what I was really interested in pursuing. It's not so much the subject of what the people who were working that I was following. It was how they sounded. Did they make it sound alive? Did they make it sound interesting? Like the waitress in Working, who basically describes how she dances between the tables because she wants to be completely graceful, and she wants people, she feels like she's on stage, and she wants the people who are dining there to appreciate that when a fork gets dropped, she can pick it up with grace. Now, that's like, to me, that just completely makes me think about waitresses in a different way. She performs like Carmen for her tips. So I'm looking for people like that. And I found one in Long Island when I went to interview a paleo-archaeologist. A paleo-archaeologist or a paleo-anthropologist is somebody who's interested in really old humans. So they go back sometimes 2-3 million years. Some of the forerunners of humans go back a lot earlier than that. But if you're interested in the archaeology of it, that's about 2 million is about the outside. And this guy was telling me about, I said, I get them all mixed up, Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis. I can't keep them straight. And he said, well, Homo erectus, those were wolves with knives. And I thought, oh my God, that's an amazing thing to say. I like the way you put that. And he said, well, you know, they ran about in feral packs. They were hairy and they were hungry, and they hunted in a coordinated way with each other. Plus, they could make their own deadly tools. So they would outrun their prey. They would chase down their prey and kill them with these knives that they had made, these stone points, as the archaeologist calls them. So I said, well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Somebody who can make the subject come alive for me, who knows nothing, who had not taken a science class in probably over 40 years anyway. And he made it so interesting to me. And I said, can I take a class with you? This guy, a guy named John Shay. Could I take a class with you? He said, sure. Here's our textbooks. We'll be starting in 2 weeks. Show up. So I would drive like 80 miles each way to go to this class, and I just sit there with my mouth open. You know, undergraduate education is wasted on those kids. It is like really, it is really, you get old enough and you just sit there and go, this is fascinating. So I learned about wolves with knives and a few other things with him. And I also learned about much more recent history, because there are archaeologists who are concerned not just with our colonial past, you know, the past that happened since European settlers came over here. In the past, like roughly 500 years, there are people who are interested in the archaeology of like 5 minutes ago. You know, the trash that I just left up in your green room, Mallory, might be of interest to an archaeologist.
Oh yeah, we're saving it.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's very important too. So several of the archaeologists that I was dealing with are particularly interested in what they call historical archaeology, and that's archaeology from pretty much the colonial period. And one of them I'd like to tell you about is a woman who has all by herself set up an independent archaeology center in Newport, Rhode Island. So that's pretty cool. What's in Newport? Oh my goodness, that is a great place for underwater archaeology, because there are all kinds of shipwrecks that are sunk around there. And in fact, she has found a fleet. She now has a team. She is training amateurs and professionals. She is a certified marine surveyor, so she understands how boats work. Not only boats that are out there right now, like the yachts that are in the harbor owned by some of the people from Newport, but she also understands what boats were built like hundreds of years ago. So she can tell you what she's looking for. And this is the thing that I think impressed me more than almost anything about archaeologists, is how much they have to know about material culture. You know, if you're digging in a Caribbean sugar plantation, you have to know about all the different parts that go into turning sugarcane into various other products. You have to know what this conical little, dripper is. You have to be able to recognize this stuff when you come across it. So their minds are like encyclopedias of this kind of stuff. All right, this woman, the great thing about this woman is, well, it's not the great thing about her that she doesn't have any money, but she doesn't have any money. She does this. This is her life's work. This is her calling. As Joan Rivers said to Louis C.K. one time, you know, what we do is not a job. What we do is a calling. And that's the kind of people that I'm interested in. People who are doing it because they really feel a larger sense of allegiance to something besides just earning a living. They really want to contribute to our shared human culture and save those little bits of cultural history. So this woman, whose name is Kathy Abbas, has built this thing up on almost nothing, on little dimes, on the kind of change that falls out of people's wallets in Newport. She took me around in her broken down van, that she said, well, it could quit at any time. And if so, then we're going to be on foot. Fine, okay, chug, 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 chug. And we go through the beautiful streets of Newport, and she's pointing out, well, the 18th century wharves used to be there, but somebody took them out. And she's pointing out that used to be a hospital for Revolutionary War soldiers. It's now a private property and you can't go on it, but it's historic and, of interest to us. So she sees this place almost with an X-ray vision. She sees it as it is now and she sees it into the past. She also started pointing out some of the mansions, and she said to me, you can tell the difference between the real mansions and the McMansions, right? You can tell the difference between the authentic architecture of, whenever it was built and stuff that has been erected in the past few years. And I said, yeah, I kind of thought I could. Well, she can, even though she lives in very humble quarters further up the island. She also pointed out the houses where she had been an honored guest at this table and had met a famous archaeologist. And then she pointed to another house and she said, I used to clean that woman's floors. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I couldn't pay my lab fees. This is a woman with, flyaway white hair, and she's just like, she's just going along with her little rescue dog in her puttering van. And she says, I couldn't pay my lab fee, so I started cleaning houses, to earn some money to do that. And I still get stopped by women in town saying, I just never could find anybody as good as you. And I thought, wow, that really tells you something about archaeology, right? That she would be willing to scrub floors to do what she wants to do. Now, what does she want to do? At the moment, she wants to raise a sunken fleet of ships from the Revolutionary War that were sunk by the British when the French came steaming in to the Americans' rescue. The thing is, you can't bring up underwater, ships without having a place to conserve them and to store them. That is part of the archaeologist's mission. They feel a real responsibility. You don't just dig it up like Indiana Jones and gallop off and throw it in your museum or whatever. You have to conserve it. And the thing about underwater archaeology is that if even the wooden things that would rot in other places, if it gets under the silt and is deprived of oxygen, it can stay pretty much the way it was. And as soon as it hits the air, it starts to disintegrate. So they have to also be experts in material culture. They have to be, in her case, a fundraiser to try to build a facility to put these things. And she's making partnerships with people in Australia who have an interest for very interesting reasons in one of the ships that are sunk there. Anyway, she was one of those people that as soon as I met her, I said, I want to know how you live. I want to know how you work. And I would just follow you anywhere. Like a little puppy dog, I follow you around. And she'll stop in the middle of telling me something and say, now, do you understand the difference between the way that they teach archaeology in the United States and the way that they teach archaeology in the United Kingdom? It's very different. Do you understand this? And every one of them would walk me through. They would walk this science-ignorant person through all the steps of it. And consequently, when I sat down to write it, they had made the subject come so alive for me that it wasn't hard to convey my own personal excitement at finally being outdoors, which I had not been for a long time, since I had been writing about indoor professions. There I was, outdoors, mosquitoes attacking me, wild, crazy lizards. At some point, I was chased with a group of other archaeology students by killer bees. Okay, it won't make it into an Indiana Jones adventure, but I can assure you it was pretty terrifying. Now, the last person that I would like to tell you about from my book is the guy who you saw a picture of. He was leaning over and sort of pointing into the woods. He is a man who I followed longer than anybody else. I just knew, I didn't understand why I needed to do a story about him. But I read very early on that he had been a contract archaeologist going over this piece of land in Fishkill, New York. Have you all been to Fishkill? It's not that far away, right? It's, this is it looked actually kind of pretty in those pictures. It's not pretty. That part of it is not pretty. It's across from a ghost mall, a mall that was built in the 60s, early 70s, that's now in ruins, buckling asphalt, cars whizzing by like crazy, a McDonald's, churning people through. There is one structure in this area of the Fishkill Supply Depot that's still standing from the Revolutionary War. It's the Van Wyck Museum. And they have a tiny little, it's kind of falling apart too, they have a tiny little museum there where they have put artifacts that have been found from this area, that have been found mostly by accident, because the bulldozers came in and for a long period nothing was really protected there. So now the guy owns 10 acres and he has built a super gas station that has a Godfather Pizza and a Dunkin' Donuts and something else. And he wants to build a strip mall. It's like a great place to build something like that because there are all these cars getting ready to go on 84, 684, whatever it is there. So he is required by law to bring contract archaeologists in to determine, because it's so close to a historic area, to determine if there is any irreplaceable archaeology that will prevent them from building on it. And lo and behold, he finds these dark, moist rectangles as soon as the top layer of soil has been removed. And he says, it's unmistakable. If you have worked in this business, it is unmistakable. That is the signature of an adult grave. And I got chills hearing about this. This is in 2007. The owner says, okay, I'm done with you. You guys go away. He hires another consulting firm, archaeological firm, and brings another crew in, and they have ground penetrating radar, and they find the signatures of hundreds of large rectangles. So what has been found is something that was rumored about for many years, the graveyard of the Fishkill Supply Depot. Now, who's heard of the Fishkill Supply Depot? You don't? Oh my God.
Rev War is my period. It's
Awesome.
my avocation.
Awesome.
I know there's been a big fight over that ground.
Yeah.
As recently as just a couple of years ago. It's been a big concern in the colonial era living history community, trying to preserve that.
That's so wonderful to hear. Well, I'd like to invite you and any of you who are interested. Let me finish telling the story, though, of what's happened. Yes, sure.
It wasn't just a supply depot, it was also a big medical facility.
Yes, there were hospitals there.
Particularly
Yes.
after Danbury was burned and the hospital facilities there were taken out by the Brits, they moved into more secure areas in Fishkill.
So, it was a mustering ground. It was fantastic that they were able to keep it secret. George Washington's letters say, bring the wounded up the river to Fishkill's hospitals. That's what he was talking about. Now, a lot of those in the ground are soldiers who succumb to various diseases or succumb to their wounds or were hung for desertion or accidentally, fell in the creek and drowned. I mean, there were all kinds of things that happened to them. How many were actually from the Battle of White Plains, we don't really know. We don't know much about not only that, but a whole lot of our history. It's like really interesting thing that I learned in doing all of this work is there's a whole lot of gaps, and we think we know what happened, and we think it's clear, when in fact, the past is a wilderness. It's like something that we can discover with an incredible sense of discovery from where we sit now. So he finds these graves, this man, Bill Sandy. And, his contract is over. He goes on and does other work. And there are people who are, interested in the history of Fishkill who live there who were really bothered by the fact that there are graves there and they're still talking about building around them. They really want that land saved, preserved, and some headstones erected to honor the first veterans of our first war. I mean, think about it, right? And so they call him up and say, would you tell us about what you found? And, he's like, well, I'm no longer under contract. I don't have any kind of secret, agreement to keep this a secret. I think I have, in fact, an obligation to this archaeological site, to this archaeological treasure. And so he goes and talks to them, and so begins an avocation for this archaeologist of speaking about this 10-acre plot of land and what he found there. And now, in almost every season, he gathers at the Van Wyck House with people who have banded together and call themselves the Friends of the Fishkill Supply Depot. And with the permission of this owner, a mysterious man, he tells about it, and they walk a quarter of a mile up, busy Route 9, and they turn in at what looks like a perfectly vacant lot. There is nothing at all about it that would make you think that there was archaeology at all, much less significant archaeology. And he stands there and he tells about finding the graves and what it means and what they've learned about it since they found it. And sometimes there are politicians there, and there are very moving ceremonies. like on Veterans Day, or Memorial Day is when they really go and plant the flags. They have a historian now who has identified 85 people who died at Fishkill and are presumably buried there. And 20 of them are from Connecticut. It was like there was a huge contingent of Connecticut. Israel Putnam was there for a time. I mean, it was like really quite fascinating to see the history come alive. There are several people in the past few years who've come forward who are descendants of the people who were buried there. So it's taken on a life of its own, even though superficially nothing has changed. It looks exactly as it did in 2007. The owner is still the owner. He's still talking. It still costs $5 million if you want to buy him out and create something there. And people are still talking about, well, I don't know, could we have a strip mall just on this side of it and preserve the graveyard, or can we raise the money to buy this? Anyway, there's the archaeologist right in the middle of all of it. His is the voice. It is his quote, where he's saying in his folksy way, and he says it a different time each way when he's talking about this graveyard, if you told me 3 stories that your grandfather told you, I'd be very interested in them, but I take them with a grain of salt. Archaeologists are skeptics. We want proof. We want proof in the ground that something is the way you say it is, which I also thought was an amazing quote. When I went to write that chapter, I wasn't able to get some of his folksy humor into it. It struck the wrong note right there. And even though almost everybody else gets a humorous turn, and I am, because, even though the book says there are no dinosaurs in this book, that's the first line of the book, I'm a dinosaur. I'm the complete dinosaur in the middle of all of this, and I make every mistake you could possibly make on these digs, which I finally earned a spot at. But he says, oh gosh, what was my thought here? Hold on. Okay, I could not convey his humor, though, without sort of disturbing the mood of that chapter. So I had a scene in there for the longest amount of time where we were sitting. We had done Wreath Day. We had gone on December 13th. That's what I was going to invite you to. December 13th is Wreath Day, and all across the country, Arlington Cemetery, anywhere where veterans are buried, people have at the same time will lay wreaths on graves and say a few words about it. So it's kind of a cool grassroots thing that has happened. And Bill Sandy started doing this at Fishkill. And so we did that, I don't know, 2011. And we come back. I had been following him at that point for probably a year and a half. And we sit down at this picnic bench. It's freezing. It's December, and we're eating sandwiches out of, one of those plastic bags that they wrap your newspaper in. And he's sitting next to this woman in a plaid jacket, and she passes me a sandwich. And I talk to them for a little while, and she says something that shows she really kind of knows what's going on with him. And I said, in this clueless way, "Are you guys connected?" And he said, "Only in the middle of the night." At which point, I fell off the bench. She fell off the bench. I mean, it was just like he says stuff like that all the time. And you won't read that in the book because there are some things that have to be left out. At any rate, I had to follow him for almost 2 years before I knew that he was in a committed relationship with somebody. I had to follow him for 3 years, and I was helping him at a dig, and he said, and I said, "What kind of place do you live in? I really want a picture." And he said, "You want to see." And so there is a little section of his chapter where I follow him through the country. He lives in a converted vegetable stand, fruit and vegetable stand. And guess what? It is full of archives. It is full of the history of oh, am I going to get this right? Oldsmobiles. He collects Oldsmobile, these manuals that tell you how to repair Oldsmobiles. He collects postcards. He collects everything. And I thought, you know what? In my original instinct to follow archaeologists, I was thinking they're really not that much different from librarians and archivists. And nobody could really, are you kidding? One works outside, one works inside, one works with text, one works with objects, one works with bones, one works with books. There are so many ways that they're different, but there are ways that they're alike too. Oh, there's another important way that they're different, as I discovered. Librarians drink wine, archaeologists drink beer. Okay? Anyway, that's a huge difference. Well, because they work outside. That was the first realization, really late in. Oh, this guy is also an archivist. He's an archivist and an archaeologist. There's something that burns in some people where they don't want to throw things away, where they want the history of an object. They want not just the object. They don't want to know just what it's worth outside the box so many years later, but they want the context of somebody's dear friend saying, I'm going to give you something really special to me in honor of your new book. And that story that attaches to the object somehow gives it an additional meaning. What was the cat buried in the witch's wall? What the archaeologists were speculating was burying a live cat in a wall was a way to keep the evil spirits away. And you just go, okay, you just jumped off the cliff, Mr. Scientist, right? I mean, that's like crazy. Maybe the cat got trapped in the wall. How do you know the cat was alive when it was buried in the wall? And what are you going to do with the cat bones anyway? What I would like to say in conclusion is that the one thing that I think connects these three professions, obituary writers, librarians and archivists, and archaeologists, is curiosity. They really want to know about people and the lives that they lived. They really want to know that, and they want it captured in some way. So it's not just something that, goes off into the air that you hear for once, that somehow somebody coming behind you can access that same information. And that was something that I felt, even though God forbid I would ever be an archaeologist. Bless those people for putting sharp tools in my hands. I am dangerous, I could not be I would not have the patience to be a librarian. And obit writer, I could not do that for a daily newspaper. That is man, you are in the trenches for that. But I have a curiosity, and if you give me enough time, I can figure something out about it. At any rate, having started knowing nothing about science, one of the reviews that came out called me Science Reporter Johnson. Yay! I share that with you, and I'd like to open it for questions now, if you like. Thanks. Mallory.
So nice to hear that you see the common thread as curiosity, and I think that's something, at least here at Darien Library, we look for in employees, is you have to have an insatiable curiosity about everything. And that's not just books, that's asking questions, that's whenever someone comes to us and has a question and we don't know the answer, that's fine, but we're able to figure it out.
That's right.
So what's next? You've done these three occupations. You are insatiably curious as well.
I introduced a novelist one time, and I asked him the same question. He said, "Isn't it enough that I've done these?" He hasn't published another book either. Isn't it? I don't have any idea. Do you have an idea? I mean, clearly there's a thread that we can kind of figure out. There's a million stories out there, and there are a million people doing fascinating things. And when you read the obituaries, you go, you know, you watch TV, it's the same 5 stories over and over again. It's like you think there's nothing new in the world, and then you read the obituaries, and here's, you know, the model who then became a cop, and then, you know, in her later life, you know, took up gardening. I don't know. People do amazingly creative individual things with their lives that don't get captured in popular literature. And I think that's what I'm looking for, the overlay, you know, the thing that is right in front of our noses. Everybody thinks they know what archaeologists do because they're all familiar with Indiana Jones or, you know, Ayla in Clan of the Cave Bear. They feel like they know what ancient life was like or what the people who study it and dig it do. But in fact, that's not true. And curiosity is really the only thing that would keep you on your knees in 120-degree heat in full sun with, you know, crazy insects, man. Oh my goodness. And organic slime. There's some gross stuff in this book. They're curious. They want to see what's next, what's under there. It's great. And I think that's really true of this library in particular.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I always thought that visiting elder housing to listen to the stories or somehow record the stories of those people who have lived in eras before ours would be a fascinating thing to put together, like Turkle did with working. This would be chapters of people who've lived through probably the 30s would still be there, the 40s. That seems to be a fascinating. I'm always curious about the other people's stories.
Do you have a card? I've been thinking the same thing. I mean, you know, if you think of cultural memory as something fragile, you know, obit writers are trying to capture,
Yes.
you know, the person's essence just as they're escaping, you know, and recreating it, just have that little ghost of the personality there. You know, and archaeologists are trying to piece it together with, you know, broken pieces of a puzzle. And librarians and archivists, oh my goodness, you know, capture the history of, you know, of recorded history, a tiny bit of it. And what's happening as our population is aging, I mean, think about all that knowledge. Think about all that experience, and it just does not seem like it's getting tapped. And here are a nice long stretch of extra years that we have because of, you know, our health, you know, and our advanced medicine that, you know, can keep us going. You know, for those who don't lose their memory, who's siphoning off, who's like capturing it before they leave? I think that's exactly right. It's all cultural anthropology, maybe. You know, they don't know where to put this book in bookstores. It's just like, good luck finding this at Barnes & Noble. It's hilarious. It's really, it just ends up on shelves with things about riots in the 60s and pottery.
That's interesting.
It makes no sense. I don't know who thinks those things up. This book is overdue was in the parenting section of the Borders, you know, before it closed. I'm sure that's what killed it, by the way. It's in the parenting section, and I said, this is not safe for children. This has nothing about children in it. This does not belong here. But it had, you know, a cartoon figure on the cover, and aren't librarians all about children? Oh, a little bit. Yes, sir?
It seems to me like it would be a good thing to marry an archaeologist, because the older you get, the more he or she's going to like you.
Well, I'll tell you, these archaeologists, in fact, a bunch of the marriages were older women and younger men. It was very interesting. I didn't really want to touch that, but. And, you know, one of the first clues that they were going to be a really fascinating subject of study was, do you know who Louis Binford was? Louis Binford revolutionized archaeology in the United States because he wanted to bring in anthropology and he wanted to study hunter-gatherers who were living currently among the Inuit. Anyway, it's almost impossible to describe what it was he did, but they all think it was really important. And I read his obituary, and it said, you know, he leaves his wife, who was also his collaborator, who was his sixth wife. And he had had several of his wives had been archaeologists and collaborators of his. Okay, I really want to hear more about this. What happened? Anyway, apparently he was a really amazing speaker and he couldn't write very well, so the wife archaeologist of the moment would be the designated writer. Anyway, we don't mention him very much in the book either. Well, okay, so obviously I will talk forever if given the opportunity, but also I really love to correspond with people about that. So I'm here. If you want to talk to me individually, or if you would like me to put a paw print on your book, if you'd like a great souvenir, if you know anybody who is going to an archaeological destination, like Machu Picchu, or Stonehenge, or Angkor Wat, I think they really need to read this book first. It is a great gift for those kinds of people because I'll tell you, when I was at Machu Picchu with the Archeologist, it is, first of all, it's like there's no handrails. It's not like Disney World, okay? It's like, and they don't have a medical facility right there, and a lot of people wait until the last minute to, you know, put that on their bucket list, and they're, you know, struggling up these things at altitude. Some of them are falling over. It's not pretty, and I think you need to know that, in fact, it's also a much bigger site than what they've excavated so far. Anyway, looking at that place and looking at any of these places through archaeologists' eyes is pretty cool, and you pay a real premium if you go on a tour with an actual archaeologist. I'll save you that trouble. Thank you all so much for your attention.